9 p.m. on ET. Now it's a mixed verdict from India Inc. after the big GST reboot. CEO and tax heads who participated in an EY ET Now survey say they're only partially ready for GST compliance, although they admit that the comfort factor has risen considerably. Concerns over IT glitches and supply chain problems still remain.
Finance Minister Arun Jaitley slams former Finance Minister Padayappan Chidambaram for his criticism over the big GST reboot, says it is juvenile to link the rate revision to Gujarat polls, even as he hints at further rationalization of tariffs, also rebuffs the call for a single rate structure.
Indo-US bonhomie in full display as Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump meet in the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in Manila. The two leaders discuss terror, trade ties and China. PM Modi also underlines growing relations between the two nations.
Supreme Court cracks the whip on the centre, the Delhi state government and its neighbouring states over the smog situation in the national capital region. Calling it an emergency-like situation, the top court seeks responses from the central and state governments on the actions taken to curb pollution.
Sri Ravi Shankar prepares to play mediator in the Ayodhya dispute ahead of his upcoming visit to the Ram temple later this week. The spiritual guru says dispute can only be resolved through dialogue. Sri will meet UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath and other stakeholders during his trip.
It's a shaky start to the week on Dalal Street. The Nifty closes below the 10,250 mark for the first time in 3 weeks, even as the Sensex tanked nearly 300 points due to the broad-based sell-off across sectors. Top global voice Chris Wood of CLSA believes Asian markets will outperform its US and UK peers.
IDEA agrees to sell its tower business to a unit of American Tower Corporation as it looks to pay debt and raise capital. Deal likely to fetch the Aditya Birla Group telco about 4,000 crore rupees. Meanwhile, the company's stock takes a beating in trade after it reports higher losses in the quarter gone by.
The outrage over Padmavati aggravates as protests break out in different parts of the nation against the upcoming period drama. Right-wing groups vandalize and tear down the film's posters, even as the film's producers and actors request the disruptors to give the movie a chance. Meanwhile, Sanjay Leela Bhansali agrees to the movie being shown to historians. Good evening. This is the India Development Debate. I'm Supriya Srinath in New Delhi, and joining me in Mumbai is my colleague Sandeep Gurumurthy. It is perhaps too early to celebrate, despite last week's big GST reboot that seems to be the clear verdict, at least from Indian industry, after the empowered GST Council slashed the tax rates on 178 items at the Guwahati meeting on last Friday. A survey done by global consulting giant EY exclusively for ET Now reveals that although the level of comfort for industry and traders has improved considerably post the big reset, they are not completely prepared in terms of compliance. Now, most chief executives and tax heads who participated in the EY ET Now survey say their IT systems are only partially ready to brace the big switch.
Now, another important finding is the lack of confidence among traders over supply chain management and distribution systems, with only a fraction of the respondents giving a firm yes in terms of their preparedness. Against the backdrop of these interesting findings, ET Now wants to play the devil's advocate. Can industry justify the lack of preparedness now that the government has rationalized the rates? What about the technology vendor which is mandated for the upkeep of the IT backbone? More importantly, when will GST, touted as India's biggest tax reform till date, start bringing in the desired results for the economy at large? The findings of the EY ET Now survey, that's a big talking point on today's India Development Debate. And joining us on the show this evening, frankly, is one of the best panels we've had on the show. Joining us live on the India Development Debate is Mr. Harsh Mariwala, Chairman of Marico Limited. We've got Mr. Najib Shah, former Chairman of the CBEC, one of the key architects of GST. Swaminathan Iyer, Consulting Editor of ET Now, joins us live on India Development Debate as well. Bipin Sapra, Partner in Direct Tax at EY, and Viren Shah, President, Federation of Retail Traders Welfare Association, representing the traders. Mr. Mariwala, I'm going to start off with you. Pleasure having you live on the show this evening. You know, one of the key findings of this survey is that even after the GST reboot that happened and post the relaxation in compliance norms that happened at the last meeting, only 32% of CXOs that we polled believe they are fairly comfortable in terms of operational readiness when it comes to GST. Is that a bit surprising to you? What explains this, the fact that even now there isn't enough degree of comfort in corporate India at large when it comes to GST?
See, I think you must realize that GST is a very complex reform. It's a very big reform, and it needs consensus at the state level amongst all the state finance ministers. And the government has taken a consensus approach in driving GST implementation. So what I see the results of the survey is on a continuum, you know. If you had taken the survey maybe 2 months back, you would have got much inferior results. But today's results would definitely be better than if you had taken a survey 2 months back. And if you take it 2 or 3 months later, I'm sure the results will still be better. The positive thing is that the government is conscious of the fact that there are issues to do with return filing, issues to do with GST network, the number of rates, but they are conscious that they are working towards resolving these issues. And I think that's the most positive sign I'm seeing in the implementation of GST. So I'm not worried. If you ask me, am I worried in terms of GST difficulties? It's a matter of time, and I think it will just even out. And there is a learning curve, and partly because of the learning curve also, I think some people may not be fully comfortable in terms of what they need to do, especially the learning curve amongst wholesalers, small retailers is much more. The corporate, the big players are very well geared to meet the challenge. They were geared earlier also, and they are fully geared now. But the problem, I think, is more in rural area, amongst the wholesalers.
Right. Mr. Mariwala, before I move on to my next guest, I must thank you once again for being on the show live. It's always a pleasure chatting with the Indian industry with a frank view and live on the India Development Debate. So thanks very much for being with us. But Mr. Najib Shah, I'm going to point out the same question to you. What explains the fact that only 32% of CXOs polled believe that they are fairly comfortable with the operational readiness? I mean, I can't put 2 and 2 together. There's been so much that has been done in terms of relaxations or rationalizations of rates, or the whole reboot that happens. Compliance norms have been eased, and even then only 32% of CXOs poll believe they are fairly comfortable with the operational readiness. What does that tell you? Mr. Shah?
Quite frankly, I'm very, very surprised. Yes, indeed, I can hear you. And quite frankly, I'm very surprised by the results of the survey, because GST has been in the public domain now for quite some time. The government has been publicizing the various nuances of the laws. Sector-specific clarifications have been issued. Like you pointed out, the last meeting of the GST Council saw some huge, humongous changes being made in the rates. And we always, when I was in the government at least, we always felt that the government was a bit ahead of the curve, in the sense that the industry was all the time waiting for further clarity and clarifications to keep coming. And thus, I think they started off a bit late trying to catch up with the law itself. But again, like our previous speaker did mention, I'm sure this is a learning curve. This is a process which will only improve with time goes. And I think you should do the survey again after some time, and you'll get better results.
Indeed. Let me get on board Swami. And Swami, I think this survey has got some specific pointers, and I think some of them are very surprising and probably a better reflection of the pain points. Now, only 26%, Swami, of people, of CXOs polled by EY for ET now, believe internal IT systems are ready for effective GST compliance. Now, just to put this in context, we did a similar survey with EY in the month of September, and back then that figure was at 24%, which effectively means that in the last 2 months, there's hardly been any improvement when it comes to readiness of internal IT systems. Who is to blame for that, Swami?
You know, the thing that struck me most about this overall survey was that while there were a huge number of complaints and a huge number of issues, not one single person was negative in the long term, and 90% were positive about the long term. So in other words, what everybody is saying is that this is a good system with good long-term prospects, and all our complaints need to be seen within that particular long-term perspective. Secondly, yes, I think the survey shows our private sector in a pretty disgraceful light. They've had ample warning. They've been told ages ago what was going to happen. And I am shocked at the level of non-readiness on the part of people who have been warned again and again, who have been given time and again and again. You know, there is a tendency of the private sector to just blame the government. And without doubt, there are a series of glitches which the government has to take the responsibility for. But I would say that overall, I am really surprised as to how unready business appears to be so many months after they were told categorically this is going to take off. So this does not reflect well on Indian business. I do hope that they can clean up their act within 6 to 12 months as the survey seems to suggest. But really, if after so many months they are still so far behind the curve, I mean, it shows just a lack of diligence, a lack of application on the part of the private sector. And I would say between the government and private sector, both have to take responsibility for the fact that the implementation of GST so far has been bedeviled with a whole lot of glitches.
Right. Right. Okay, that's a fair point indeed, that both have to take responsibility, but the private sector should have been better prepared. Mr. Sabra, you're the leader of the indirect taxes at EY. What explains this position on the ground? And these are the CXOs of some really large companies that have been polled, and only 26% believe that the internal IT systems are ready for effective GST compliance. Is there a callousness on the part of Indian industry? Did they not see it coming? Did they not take the government seriously? I mean, what explains the fact that internal IT systems are not ready? Forget about the GSTN and all of that, and we'll discuss and debate that also in the show. But internal IT systems, it doesn't really add up.
So what I'll say out here is that you have to understand that this is not about callousness or not being ready. See, GST has been an evolving law, and it's actually a very complex law. So there has been a lot of uncertainty around this law from the time of its implementation. So while people have walked towards the IT implementation, the IT transition, they have worked towards getting their IT systems ready. You have to realize that there are two parts of the IT system which we are talking about. One, which is the business part of it, and most of the people were ready on day one with their business IT systems. You wouldn't have found any glitches in terms of people's ability to deliver, or there were any shortages or any problems, and it's very much intrinsically linked with the IT systems. So the business IT systems were absolutely dot on day one. The second part is the IT systems which are required for compliances. And when you're talking to tax heads and people who are involved in the finance professionals who are involved in compliances, a lot of perception depends upon how you see the compliances coming around. And while there is one part where the GSTN itself has struggled to reach to its efficient level, and really there are complexities, there are glitches out there which it is working on. It also requires some time to really get its act together. The compliance part, which was supposed to be linked with the IT filing, that part of the corporates has yet not got on in the same way, or the comfort level of the CXOs who are involved in the compliance process is not that great. So we are talking about perception. So all the industries which we deal with have worked towards getting the IT systems ready. There is no callousness out there, but the quality of the compliances, the quality of data. See, you have to require, we are talking of transaction level data being filed now.
Right.
Now, the transaction level data, the quality of that data to get it in due time is a hugely complex scenario.
Right.
So that my perception is that that's where the poll has really shown that the comfort level is not that high.
Okay, Fair point. Let me get the word from Mr. Mariwala. Mr. Mariwala, how do you read this? And I know for large corporations like yours, probably it may not be such an issue, but for business as a whole, and I'm not just talking about the small and medium enterprises and the sort of wholesalers, but for business as a whole, IT readiness has clearly been a concern, and this is 4 months after implementation of GST. Would you blame it on India Inc. as a whole, or would you blame it on the GST network? And a lot of people have raised questions on the GST network as well, and its ability to take the load of data as well. What's your own sense on what's causing this lack of IT preparedness? Because this clearly seems to be the big pain point as far as GST is concerned.
See, I don't think I've interacted with many corporates, and I have not heard that they're not ready from the IT point of view. So the fact that you got a low score is a bit surprising. Maybe you've gone to middle-sized companies, but the large companies are fully ready, fully compliant, and I don't see that they're facing any issues. Of course, there are issues with the GST and network, and I believe the government has also appointed a task force under the BR Finance Minister Sushil Modi to handle this and to make changes in the GST network. Again, a learning curve. Maybe the Infosys didn't do a proper job. I don't know what are the reason, but I think the government is after this to improve the network issues in terms of glitches, not able to load data. I think it is a reflection of more about network rather than the readiness, especially amongst the large industries.
Okay, that's a fair point indeed, and I'm coming to Viren Shah, who I'm presuming will now say that if big businesses and if big corporate houses are not ready to fully comply, how do you expect the small traders to be? And in fact, I'm presuming, and I'm given to understand, Mr. Shah, that Kate has now threatened to move court against Infosys. Have the traders found a new scapegoat there?
First of all, I am not surprised with this survey. Because this survey has to be done in a two different format. One is with the urban sector, and one is a 2-tier, 3-tier, and the villages. I guess if we do that, the urban sector will definitely have more their access to it. They are aware of the GST compliance, and there should not be any problem with them. All the traders are ready to file the GST. Only issue is that the smaller towns where a lot of not good professionals are there to help them out, and also secondly, because of the GST slabs were too high, people were not ready. But now, since the government is positive, they are ready to come down and they are ready to listen, they are ready to change everything. Things will go change. You will be seeing next month onwards, 2 months, 3 months, there will be more and more people will come forward and start registering, and even the compliance will get simpler, easier. As far as urban city is concerned, as far as corporate structure is concerned, as far as medium and the large format retail sector is concerned, there is no issue at all.
Okay.
Only issue is the smaller and medium sector.
Okay.
And again the smaller town.
Okay, you're saying it's only the small and medium enterprises who are having an issue, but a lot of people have raised concerns on the network. And Mr. Shah, I'm going to come to you because you also raised concerns on the network. And this survey clearly, like Vipin pointed out, and he sort of did this survey for us, with EY. The issue is not so much with companies' preparedness as it is with the IT service provider, which in this case is Infosys. Is it fair to blame Infosys? When we reached out to Infosys on the state of the network, and this is what they said. They said the system is successful across several parameters. GST is a large-scale and transformative process. Complex nature, rapid changes has to be adjusted, and modifications had to be integrated. So they're believing that there have been too many changes. It's complex, and these modifications need to be integrated on a real-time basis. So this is the best that they could do. Do you buy that justification from Infosys, or do you believe it's only fair to blame them for this?
Look, there is no denying the fact that GST is a complex law. There is also no denying the fact that the government has repeatedly made changes across business processes, across rates, across the filing, across the pattern of the filing. All this means challenges for the technology provider to keep up with these changes and to carry out these changes. And again, to be fair to the technology provider, little time has been provided to them to carry out these changes itself. But having said all that, the fact of the matter remains that they were closely associated with the entire process, simply because the government would have wanted to make them aware of the changes and the law itself so that they carry out the necessary IT development work. So it is a little disappointing, but definitely I think with all this discussion and debate and spotlight on them, GSTN will definitely improve and get any better in the future, more so with the GOM also having been constituted to look at the challenges which the IT provider is facing. So I think things will improve now.
On that positive note, I'm going to repeat the same question for Swami, who's not always all that optimistic. But Swami, I'm going to take my chances with you. Is it fair to blame Infosys in this case? Because Infosys in its defense is saying it's transformative and modifications are also taking its toll. You know, these frequent changes that are coming in terms of clarifications or in terms of more rate rationalizations or compliance rules that are being changed. This is also making a difference. You know, every change has to be accommodated. Every change means a change in the network. Would you blame Infosys for it, Swami, or would you actually say that the fact that it was done in a hurry, not much trial runs apparently were allowed, and the fact that so many modifications are now coming in also perhaps should be held responsible for the network not really taking off?
I think without doing a further study, it would be wrong to come to a categorical conclusion on saying, you know, Infosys has messed up. It's possible it has. It's possible that it could have done much better. But just on the basis of this survey and what we've heard, I'm not sure. One had expected that, I mean, what I had written was GST is not an event, it is a process. There are going to be, what in effect Arun Jaitley said was, rather than get everything perfect and wait for that, let us just jump into this thing. There will be a mess and then we will keep cleaning it up as we go along. In that particular, I think that particular strategy was justified. Because, you know, if you kept waiting for perfection, it wouldn't have happened. So once you jumped in, you had all these imperfections. Then the question arises, is the fault right now that of Infosys or of the mess within the system? I personally am unable to take a strong line on that. I think Infosys may be significantly to blame, but without a more detailed examination, I think it would be wrong just to condemn them.
Fair enough. And you know, Swami, we did look at this issue in a more granular manner in a poll, which is why I'm going to go to Bipin Sapra to help us understand this point. You know, Bipin, we asked CXOs in relation to the present IT readiness, what are the major issues that you're facing? And we gave them 3 specific points. And what this poll seems to indicate that is that the pain point is ERP readiness and software readiness. Could you help us understand what does the survey throw up when it comes to the specific issue on IT preparedness that's hurting corporate India?
So there are a couple of things where the corporate are facing challenges. What you have to realize is that GST is impacting the entire supply chain for the industries. The rates have changed, the way the businesses are being done have changed, the invoicing has changed, and a lot of companies have worked towards changing their ERP system long back when the first drafts were out. So over a period of time, the law has evolved and they have worked on the ERP systems. But these ERP systems are now required to not only do work on the business side of things, which they are fairly comfortable doing, but also to provide data, the transaction level data, which would be used to do the compliances. And that's where wherever those linkages are coming around to provide those data, the further interfaces are causing some issues, given that the GSTN hasn't stabilized. There are issues in terms of the law changing, and the compliances, the formats of the compliances are hugely complex. So the ERP part of it, which gets linked to the final compliances which go there, that's something which is one causing the problems. The second, what we are seeing is that the data which is being churned out, So one is the entry level data which is going in is not correct. The data which is available from the ERP is in a certain format, and what is required for compliances is in a different format. So at the ground level, these changes are really causing concern to the industry, to the people who are involved in compliances, and hence that's where we see major areas of discomfort which are coming in. So what you have to realize is that from a business point of view, as I said earlier also, we are the companies are fairly comfortable, the business is going on, but when this data has to be supplied, when there is the software has to be ready to be to provide the data which is the transaction level data which would do the compliances, that's where the real problem lies.
Okay, I'm actually going to turn focus and talk about the other big finding of this survey. And Mr. Mariwala, this is coming your way. Let's talk about supply chains right now. Only 16% of the CXOs poll believe that supply chains are not fully ready. 70% believe it is only partially ready. We are more than 4 months into the GST implementation. Can we blame the government alone for the supply chain being disrupted?
No, I'm a bit surprised by these results because when I talk of supply chain, it means that from sourcing of raw material to the end point, which is supplying the goods to the retailer and the consumer, at least as far as the FMCG is concerned. And I think most companies are geared towards that. I think they may be referring to the fact that the wholesalers and the rural retailers are not able to comply with this, and that's where the demand has been impacted. But I don't think that the supply chain issues are facing. Okay, there are some economies in terms of supply chain, in terms of condensing the depots and all that, but that can be done anytime. It's a matter of internal decision whether you want to condense the number of depots and within what time frame. But that's a matter of efficiency. I don't think it has anything to do with the supply chain in terms of supplying goods to the consumer. So if you say that I want to improve my efficiencies and because of that I can reduce my costs, I can take a few months. I don't need to be doing it in a hurry. But frankly, I'm quite surprised at these findings in terms of supply chain problems, because I've never heard any FMCG company saying that I have supply chain issues. If at all, the issue is more to do with the trade, and that also in rural areas and amongst wholesalers.
To be fair, what the survey says is 16% believe it's fully ready and about 72% say it's partially ready. So, one way of looking at it is that 88% believe that it's sort of ready or thereabout. So that's another way of interpreting the data. But Viren Shah, let me come to you. Many would argue that this is partly because that a large section of wholesalers and retailers have not really embraced GST. They've sort of been, a sort of a stumbling block to ensure that the supply chain, is sort of GST compliant, and that many argue that it's because of the resistance of wholesalers and retailers, resistance of some part of the trader community that could be responsible for this. So what would you have to say to that?
See, first of all, I disagree with your view, because at the top level of the manufacturing level, supply level, there should not be any problem, and there was never a problem. Initially, when the GST introduced, yes, for a few months there was a problem at all levels, but now for suppliers from the manufacturing side, there is no problem. But yes, there is a problem of the wholesaler, distributor and the retailers. As on today, there are two reasons behind it, because a lot of traders were not ready to register under the GST, and that is why the supply chain was blocked. The reason being that the tax slab was higher, they were not ready to pay, and also the reason is that because they had to invest, because at the end of the day it is the retailers who has to invest at these stocks, because they have to pay upfront to the manufacturer and the distributor, and that's where the retailers were really hesitant to block their fund in the inventories, because the tax slab was too high, 18 and 28%, and they were not ready to register under the GST, and this is where the blockage of the chain system, which is directly to the consumers, was affecting. And now I think that will get improved in the months to come, where the government is also positive and they are going to reduce much more rates, petrol, diesel, they may get under the GST. This will all change the whole scenario in India.
Swami, I'm going to come to you. What do you attribute this to? This seemingly disrupted supply chain where A lot of people believe that there's only partial readiness and some believe there is no full readiness. What would you attribute this to? Is this because of traders not willing to embrace GST wholeheartedly? Is this invoice matching, the compliance norms? I mean, what would you put your finger on as far as this very issue is concerned?
I don't think we have sufficiently detailed knowledge on that. So I would not hazard any kind of categorical statement. I think all these different issues that have been raised, they could have played a part. We are at a stage where so much of the economy was being done on the basis of cash or on the basis of avoidance. To move from that system to some system where everybody is coming into the chain, I think was always going to be difficult. Anybody who thought that you would immediately get an end to all the avoidance and a switching away from the cash to a proper book system, I mean, obviously it was going to take time. Obviously there would be resistance from these people. Who would be resisting most at which points, I don't know. But as I said, these guys have to be pushed and pushed and pushed until they come into the system. Until they do, maybe some forbearance can be shown. But beyond the point, I think some action will have to be taken also. Otherwise, the disruption of these guys is going to create a problem for everybody else. So yes, I think the trading community has a lot to answer for, although it would be very wrong to tar everybody with the same brush.
Absolutely. It's very unfair to tar everybody with the same brush, but they do have a lot to answer for. And I think even as we blame the government, as we blame the network, as GST network, we blame everyone. I think some part of the blame also lies in a large section of the small and medium enterprises who probably need to do more to embrace GST. But Mr. Najib Shah, we spoke about this issue on a debate on Friday when the reset happened, and we had this intellectual argument between Dr. Indira Rajaraman and you on the issue of invoice matching. And that is an important issue. I'm guessing, do you believe it could be one of the reasons why the supply chain has been disrupted to the extent that it has been? Or do you think that's largely exaggerated, the impact of the issue of invoice matching on the supply chain?
Invoice matching is something which is contemplated in the GST, but it has not really started at all. And as things stand, with further relaxations in the very filing of returns, this is not an issue which is likely to come up immediately. So I tend to agree with what Mr. Iyer had mentioned about the reluctance of a certain segment of the tax base to get into the net. And I think that it is which is causing all this problem. The government has been handling this entire thing with kid gloves, really, because the law is new, and the last thing they want to do is to take any serious action as of now. But I think sooner rather than later, we would need to prod and push a few people at least to get in, fall in line and get into the net, because that is a key really for the success of GST and to ensure the flow of credit across the entire chain.
Viren, come in on that, because while you believe that things are tough to comply with, the fact also is that compliance at levels where it should have been is very, very poor, and there is no denying that. And two experts on the channel are saying that there is a certain hesitance, there is a certain resistance in terms of embracing the GST, and those who don't fall in line should be prodded or pushed. I mean, how are you going to defend that position? And do you not believe that while we don't want to paint the entire trader community as not embracing the GST, there are pockets within the trading community that are resistant, that are playing foul?
See, I do agree that yes, there are certain sections which were doing business in the cash, and suddenly they are brought under the tax regime. It's going to take little time, but I do not agree with the viewpoint that they have to be tackled very seriously, because the things are improving, things will get better. The traders wants to get into the GST because GST is a rate which is all India the same rate. It has its lot of advantage rather than disadvantage. In fact, more and more people get into the composite scheme. It's a loss to the traders, which traders do not realize right now. But it's in a long run, if you get into the registration and do the returns regularly, take the rebate, input credit and all that, you will be able to do a better business. Consumer will get a better price. You will get into a structure which is a professional structure, and I guess this is where the trader has to be very, very nicely educated rather than handle with legally and put them behind the bar and raid, and because it's a very, very new things, they are not ready yet. Yeah, but they are getting educated.
Sure.
So I think 6 months, 12 months on the line, things will get better, I'm sure.
Sure, but I do agree with Najib Shah there, saying that we must stop handling them with kid gloves. So what if there's an election in Gujarat coming up in 2 months? But Mr. Mariwala, without making this a political issue, how do you as a sort of industry leader map this transition of the economy? On the one hand, there is this move away from the informal sector to the formal sector, so what you call the formalization of the economy, and as a result, a lot of value migration is happening in the economy. Equally, there is this disruption in a large section of the unorganized sector of the economy, leading to job losses, pain in the SME sector, leading to, in turn, an economic slowdown, as many would argue. What's your own sense on this balance? And do you think this shift in the medium term is necessary, and that we need to ensure that everyone gets under the tax net? Because otherwise, the whole purpose of GST is defeated, isn't it?
See, first of all, let me tell you, I'm very optimistic about GST and the impact of GST it can have on the economy. So it's a matter of time. Sure. And I think we have to wait and watch, because it's very complex. You have to take all the states on board, so many stakeholders. So let's not try and say that GST, all the benefits should come in within a few months. And I think one should be prepared to wait for at least 9 months to 1 year by the time all the effects, positive effects of GST come in. The most positive thing in all this is that the government is very, very conscious of the fact that they need to address some of the problems which are faced by industry and trade. So net, I'm saying I'm very positive. There may be some short-term pain, but it is all for long-term gain.
All right, a short-term pain for a long-term gain, and I think the survey overall, and we'll come to that in just a bit, I think overall the survey believes that for long-term this is very good, like Swami had also alluded to earlier. But Mr. Sapra, I will come to you. A majority of the CEOs polled do believe it will take up to 0 to 6 months, actually up to 6 months, for the organizations to stabilize post the GST rollout, post the GST disruption. In some sense, and I'll take that question with others on the panel as well on GST-induced slowdown, but according to you, do you believe that is how long it's going to take for things to stabilize in the economy, for things to stabilize with companies as far as the GST is concerned?
See, I fully agree with these survey results. What you have to realize is that in the past 3 or 4 months, the GST has moved, the industry has moved from level 0 to a certain level where it is today, and the law continues to change. There have been problems in compliances. The IT systems, as we have seen, of the corporates are not fully ready. They are trying to get them aligned with whatever compliances need to be done, whatever changes are required in the ERP systems, for whatever corporates has been remaining. They are trying to get this act ready, and we also saw on 10th of November, when in the GST Council meet, that the compliances have been pushed down till the 31st of March. So most of the people do believe that in the next 6 months there would be simplification of the law. There are committees which the government has formed proactively to look into whatever the challenges which the industry has been facing, and they will bring out whatever simplification is there. The GSTN hopefully would get its act together and would get to its right efficiency by the end of this fiscal year. So I think most of the corporates are feeling, most of the CXOs are feeling that 6 months is something which is required to be where they fully would want to be, at a fully optimal level and fully compliant with the GST and comfortable with the law and procedures.
Mr. Mariwala, quick word before we take a break. Does that mean that if it's going to take 6 months for it to settle down for industry as a whole, the impact of this GST-induced slowdown that we've seen, do you think that may prolong, may slip into next fiscal as well, or do you think that's unlikely to happen?
I think you have to see this quarter's performance versus last quarter and now the next coming quarters. It will go on improving the performance, I'm sure. So there will be gradual improvement. It's not that we have to wait for 6 months for things to improve all of a sudden. But there is a continuum of improvement in terms of the impact of GST and on the economy, and maybe Mr. Iyer can speak a little bit more about this being an economist. But I still think that it's a matter of time, and we will go on seeing positive impact of GST in the coming months. The full impact can only come after 6 to 9 months, but we are prepared for that. I think most industry players are willing to wait because they realize that the long-term gain is going to be sustainable and it's going to be very beneficial to them.
All right, Swami, since you're the economist on the show, how much will you agree with the fact that this GST-induced slowdown will perhaps last for another 6 months? And given 6 months, does that mean the first 2 months of the next fiscal as well?
On the one hand, GST through disruption would tend to slow things down. On the other hand, being a better system, there will be positives as well. I mean, if for instance those octroi checks posts have gone, if there is a faster movement of traffic, there are positives flowing in, even along with the negatives of the disruption. Where the balance is going to be, I'm not quite sure. But when this GST was announced, I mean, I was pretty sure it will take at least 2 years to sort things out. I certainly did not expect that within 1 year, everything will be hunky-dory. There is a problem on the part of all the actors, including the government. Far too many rates, far too many ambiguities, and the resistance on the other side. So this is, I mean, we started off on a messy note, and I was in favor of it, saying that the mess will be sorted out through a process of iteration, of people complaining, our government trying to do something, our government complaining and the traders doing something. In this iterative process, I would say up to 2 years for the system to properly settle down. But the bulk of it, I would think, should settle down within 1 year.
Mr. Shah, we also did ask in this survey, what are the biggest issues concerning the implementation of the GST? And contrary to popular belief, only 10% believe that rate rationalization is a big issue. Is that surprising given all the noise that clamors around that one very issue, one very subject?
I'm quite happy that I think they have been very, very honest in their response to this particular query, simply because just around 19% of the entire goods fall in this 28% category, or rather fell in this 28% category. And there was going to be a seamless flow of credit. So this 28% reflected, please remember, the rates as they existed in the pre-GST era of central excise, VAT and service tax. It was not higher than what was the previous rate. Even here, the government has taken an extremely brave and bold decision in reducing these rates to cater to the requirements of trade and industry. Because I really do not know how the revenue is been behaving. The FM has gone on record to say that there is buoyancy, and there has been buoyancy which prompted the reduction in rates, because these are very, very early days for the government as far as the revenue prospects are concerned. And I'm happy that the industry has responded so positively and stated that rates as such were not an issue at all.
Mr. Mariwala, what's your own view? Is this whole, brouhaha over rates a bit of an exaggeration? Is it such a big issue towards the smooth implementation of GST? Or do you believe, like many colleagues in the industry, including Ms. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, that the government should now even move aggressively on rationalizing rates, do away with the 28% slab, irrespective of the revenue implications that it may have?
See, you must realize that, as I said again earlier, consensus was needed from the state level, and we needed a lower rate for basic goods, which was at 5%, because otherwise the poor would be subsidizing rich if you had just had one GST rate. And I think the government was right in going ahead with this strategy of having a 5% rate for basic goods. I think there is a scope, and it's a matter of time. The finance secretary also has said that they will condense the rates. So it's a continuum as I see it. You start off in a certain manner, see the experience, get the states on board, deal with fears of unknown, and then move forward. And I definitely see that 12 and 18% will get condensed to one rate. And as it is on the 28%, a lot of items have been removed from that list and gone into 18 and 12%. So fundamentally, we may have just 5%, a combination of 12 and 18% and 28%. And I think that's fine, because I don't agree with Kiran in terms of having one rate, because it would have been suicidal. It would have led to inflation of which would hit the common man, and the GST would have had so much of criticism which it had not had so far. And I believe that the government started in the right manner, and now again they are having started with that, they are looking at rationalizing the GST rates, and if not one rate, rationalizing it to 2 or 3 slabs. So I think the journey has been absolutely in the right direction, and I don't think they could have taken any risk in terms of having one rate and deal with a disaster as far as inflation is concerned and the common man is concerned. Separately, one other issue I just want to raise it, which is impacting at least the FMCG industries, the backward area benefits. We have all our factories are located in, most FMCG companies' factories are located in the backward areas, and we get excise benefits. And I think the clarity on that is still missing. We've raised it to the government, but we don't have a clear picture on that. And since I'm getting an opportunity to speak with it now, I thought I'll just raise that issue.
Oh, I'm glad you're raising that issue, because you will be heard, and I can guarantee you that. And talking about ambiguity that you just raised, and we will put forward that question, in fact, to officials and come back to our viewers and you with clarifications. But Mr. Sapra, the biggest concern remains on account of removal of ambiguity and issuance of clarifications and simplification of compliance. What more can the government do? They are trying to address via notifications or through media and all of that. But what is it that the government needs to do to remove ambiguity and to bring about clarification?
So on the ground level, the complexity of law still remains one of the biggest issues with the industry. So interpreting that law, taking positions and being certain about that is the biggest challenge. Most of the industries are struggling today that whatever positions they have taken would hold them in good stead in the coming years, and they'll be able to get their audits done peacefully in the coming years. So litigation is something which the industry is very averse to, and any complexity, any ambiguity which is there leads to a lot of litigation in the future. So the industry wants that the government should come out with, so they have come out with a lot of clarifications. Certain sectors are still remaining. There are a lot of representations which the government has, which the government is aware of, where changes are required in the law and the procedures. And the government is also working proactively, working with the industry. They have created certain committees, both from the industry side and within, where they are listening to whatever the representations have come in, and in the due course, these things hopefully would be taken care of. But on the ground, the complexity and the ambiguity in the law is the biggest factor which is impacting the industry.
Virencha, very quickly, what do you attribute to? Is this because of the complexity of GST or lack of sort of outreach, the fact that enough effort hasn't been made to explain, especially traders and small and medium entrepreneurs on, on how to sort of register with GST, or, denial of this particular tax, and the fact that people need to get on board? What do you attribute it to? How do you apportion, this among these three factors?
It's a mix of everything together. Initially, of course, people were not ready. After that, they started understanding the issue. They started giving representation to the government. There were a lot of positive signs from the government. Initially, they were adamant. Later on, they realized that eventually traders are the 90% of the people who are getting affected, because those are the people who are actually shouting from the rooftop that the rates are not too much high. And I also agree with Mr. Mariwala that in India there should not be only one tax. There has to be 2 or 3 tax structure, which is 5%, 12 and 18% is good enough. And I guess the government should understand, in India, the lower the tax, the more the people will come forward and pay the tax. It should not be that there will be a loser on the revenue at the end of the day. You will have more people coming forward positively, starting to register in the GST, starting to pay the taxes, start paying income tax. This is our main target, and government is also looking at this, and traders are all ready to do that. I think the lesser the tax structure, more the revenue to the government. That should be the motto.
Right. Okay. Okay, I get that. The volumes increase if the tax structure comes down. But Swami, I'm going to have you have the last word in the show, completely out of time here then. Despite the near-term stress that we are seeing, the survey is overwhelmingly of the view that long-term GST is positive. It is a good thing. So how much more time before GST actually becomes a good and simple tax?
Sorry, can you just repeat that? I couldn't hear that.
I'm saying the overwhelming majority believes that GST is good in the long term. So how much more time before it actually becomes the good and simple tax?
Yeah, as I said, I would expect it to take 2 years before everything is sorted out. This would include adjustments on the part of the government, adjustments on part of business, and, shall we say, the extinction of some people who have been surviving so far on tax avoidance. And, they will resist, but ultimately they would have to die out. This entire process would, I think, take at least 2 years. As I said, it's good that overall business sees that this is a positive. In fact, I wish you would ask some questions about, apart from the various glitches, what were the positives that business had got out of GST already? I mean, with the abolition of the check posts, are they able to get their export consignments that much faster? Have they become more competitive? I wish there were some questions like this also in the questionnaire to highlight the positives of the GST so far. So I would say, at the end of it all, am I dissatisfied with the speed? No. I had not expected that the glitches would get sorted out any faster than this. I think the progress has been at a reasonable pace. I am glad that a large number of items have been taken out of 28 and put into 18. Right. But I really do think we need to, that 12 and 18 need to come together at 15%. That would simplify everything. I do hope that that is what we will see in 1 year's time.
All right, trust Swami to sum it up brilliantly as always. Thank you so much, Swaminathan Iyer, Mr. Harsh Mariwala, Mr. Najib Shah, Mr. Viren Shah, and of course Mr. Bipin Sapra as well for joining in with your perspective on the India development debate. Really appreciate you all taking the time and joining us live at 9 p.m. on ET Now. In GST, we trust. That's the consensus view of corporate India after the most exhaustive CXO survey post the reboot of the ambitious tax reform. However, the key to a good and simple tax probably doesn't just lie in lower rates, but in improving the IT infrastructure.
Indeed, it does. Easing the compliance stress will always remain a work in progress, and the government must continue with its reform in that direction. But fixing the IT mess must become priority #1 for the GST to flourish. Thank you very much for being with us on the special edition of the India Development Debate. Up next is Top 10 at 10.